The Dark Knight Returns. The first, and in my opinion, the best of Frank Miller's Batman series, or the Frank Miller Batman universe. This book came out when I was a teenager, growing up on a military base during the height of the Cold War, or Reagan-era Cold War. The story that is told here is very, very much a Cold War story. If you're a child of the Cold War, there's a lot of things in there that strike really home, really just at the core of your being. Frank Miller does a real good job of mixing the fantasy world of Batman with the real world politics that were going on during the Reagan-era Cold War. The story it's a wonderful story. It touches everything that we who grew up during the Cold War had our fears and our doubts. Nuclear holocaust, so-called people being public or being puppets of the government, excuse me on that, so-called heroes, celebrities, what have you, and your common people dealing with crime. The crime rate in the 80s was, just horrendous by today's standards. And you had the rebirth of the Batman. Like I said, the story is told in 3 parts with Harvey Dent, Two-Face, the mutants being your first act. Batman versus the Joker, your second act, and Batman versus Superman, your third act. Great storytelling. The whole mutants and Harvey Dent storyline touches on a lot of really good stuff. You have nods to Catwoman, Wonder Woman, the Green Lantern, all of that. It's great storytelling. The artwork, Miller's artwork is great, both in the novel itself, or the graphic novel, I should say, itself, mixed in with the I shouldn't say mixed in with, but the way it was used in the animated movie. It was they kept true to it. They did shoehorn in the whole death in the family with Jason Todd from the graphic novel into the movie, but why not? The Dark Knight Returns came out roughly 2 years before the Death in the Family, in which basically the fan base voted Jason Todd dead because he was a dick. I, for one, was one of the ones that voted for him to die, just to see if DC would actually do it. And they did, so I digress. The story, the culmination with the standoff between Batman and Superman is great. Oliver Queen, aka the Green Arrow's bit at the end of tormenting, to me, yes, his whole thing was to shoot the kryptonite arrow to weaken Superman. Yay. But him teasing and tormenting the police was just that much more. That was a very 80s thing. It was a very... That's what we would have done in the 80s in that situation. It just was what it is. the Batman's attitude versus Superman basically being a puppet. That too is a very 80s thing. The whole line of the whole exchange between Batman and Superman, where they're discussing about being criminals. Clark Kent makes a comment about Bruce Wayne, or aka Batman, being a criminal. Then Bruce Wayne's comment is, we're all criminals. We always have been criminals. The only difference is you have a boss. That being a very philosophical way to look at it, but it's also, like I said, I go back to it, it's a very 80s attitude. That's the attitude we had, especially as teenagers. Like I said, growing up on Fort Hood, Texas, Cold War, that's what we worried about. We worried day in, day out about nuclear Armageddon. Any little thing in the news, even as kids, as young as 10, 12 years old, we were glued to the TV. Things like the Falklands War, invasion of Grenada, all those little things like that could have been a catalyst for World War III. Between us and the Soviets and mass nuclear destruction. Miller paints that picture very well, paints it very vividly, does a really good job of painting it. Or at least from somebody who was there, who was alive. I was 16 years old when this graphic novel, or the 4-issue comic series in the graphic novel came out. This, at 16 years of age, living on Fort Hood, Texas, during the Reagan years of the Cold War. This was just awesome. You have, growing up, technically lived in a little town of Copper's Cove, which was kind of the metropolis in the area. Then down the road, about 10, 12 miles, we had Killeen, Texas, which was kind of your Gotham. That's where your crime was. That's where your hookers were. That's where your big crime stuff was. So yeah, we had that parallel. You grow up, you read the comics, you have Superman, Metropolis, and Batman, and Gotham, and all that. And the story is so well written that you relate, you understand, and you hope that you can get to that point. You're hoping for the Batman, you're hoping for the happy ending. It was, like I said, it was a wonderful story, wonderful art. Also with the introduction of Kelly Carey as Robin, a female Robin. This was done before your whole SJW, equality, down with the male patriarchy bullshit that you have now. It was, now going on, 30, 40 years ahead of its time. Frank Miller did that. He introduced a female Robin. And I don't think in 1986, a lot of people cared one way or another. They didn't care if it was a male Robin, a female Robin, a giraffe Robin, or whatever, as long as the character was well written. And Frank Miller did that. Frank Miller did a really superb job, a really great job of writing the character, writing Kelly Carey, making her a believable Robin. And she wasn't the Robin that came from, death and destruction. Dick Grayson's parents were killed at the circus. Jason Todd was an orphan. Tim Drake, I can't think of his backstory right now. Damian Wayne was pretty much the product of Talia al Ghul's rape of him. So Kelly Carey is a well-written character, a well-rounded character, a dreamer with a tech-savvy dreamer at that. Frank Miller made her like a super nerd, and it didn't take Gamergate to do it. She's just intelligent, articulate character. Well written, very tech savvy, and Miller did a really good job with her. And like I said earlier, at the way it's written, it could have been male, female, giraffe, rhinoceros, kangaroo. As well as that character's written, it would have worked. And there's not a whole lot you can say about it. The portrayal of Superman as a government stooge, that is well done too. You kind of get the feeling at the end, at Bruce Wayne's funeral, that Superman kind of is realizing that he is a stooge. And that he should, that's what he is. He's not really sure what he should do. But it was, the story's handled real well. It is one of my favorite comics, if not my favorite Batman story. It's just awesome. It is a must read. If you're a comic book fan and you haven't read it, you should read it. Or I should say, if you're a DC comic book fan and you haven't read it, you should probably read it. That pretty much wraps up my insight on the Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, the first of the Frank Miller books, the Frank Miller Batman universe. I will be joining you shortly with the Batman Strikes Again. Or Batman, The Dark Knight Strikes Again. So, until we get there, have fun, be safe, peace.